You are now live.
So this is Senate Appropriations, and we're continuing our work on the budget adjustment. And we have a number of items that we need to close out. I wanted to alert you that we had a bill referred to us, and it was to address an overpayment that the city of Barry made as a result of the calculation on their TIF. It was included in a larger bill that would authorize these corrective payments in the future, but it seemed the most expeditious thing because we've done overpayments in the adjustments in the past, was to simply move that $20,000 appropriation into the budget adjustment. So are people okay with that, to move that 20,000? That would be an ed fund return, because it was an overpayment to the ed fund as a result of their TIF calculation. So, okay. The other area that we need to talk about, and that is, we had a lot of back and forth, and I hope we've got it right. And that was the timing on $1 million match that was included in the FY23 budget. That would be the necessary match for two initiatives. One would be Build to Scale, and the other was Good Jobs. And we now have clarification from Commissioner Goldstein that the $1 million being put into the big bill doesn't work time-wise. The match is needed earlier than that. So the question is, do we want to advance that match into this budget adjustment? And this would be for this funds two initiatives. One is one that is being promoted by Matt Dunn, which is Build to Scale, and the other part is the Good Jobs. And I've had communications from both Senator Sorokin and Senator Clarkson about the need to put the $1 million into the BAA that is in the budget.
Yeah, fine with me.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. We'll close that out.
Alice,
Yeah. Yes. Sorry.
There was a question at noontime from Senator Rom Hinsdale about a position that she believes would be put in as full-time, and it doesn't show up anyplace. And that was, does anybody remember exactly what it was? It's something to do with natural resources.
Yeah, they and some about some gender person or something like that. That
Ability or something, I don't know what it was.
Senator Westman, does that ring a bell? I've received no requests on that at all.
no, I think this is in ANR's budget that we're gonna have to deal with.
But is it 23 or budget adjustment?
Budget adjustments.
Yeah, but it's got to be 23. I mean, at this late date, if we put somebody on, it would be 23 anyways before they got to work.
I think what she implied was that it was a position in place now that would go from part-time to full-time. I don't know anything else about it.
Well, let me,
think
maybe
Adam-
Senator Westman knows, and Commissioner Gresham seems to think he might have some information to offer.
So this is in the FY23 A&R budget proposal, and they have a half-time DEI position. They want to make it full-time, and this person predominantly works on making sure we're in compliance with federal grants and the like. They have a 0.5, and they want to make it a full-time, just to acknowledge that this person is essentially working full-time. So that's
Does it require additional funding?
I'm sorry?
Does it require additional funding in FY22?
No, they can make it work in 22.
And they
So
can make the decision to go full-time within their own budget on the position? We actually created
Yes.
it as a half-time position.
The position is half-time now, and they want, starting in FY23, make it full-time.
So when
Yeah.
we created it, it was only a half-time position? Or can we administratively make it go from part-time to full-time as long as the money's there?
I think we can do it within the administration, or you can do it legislatively, one or the other. But I mean, the reason that it's in the budget is because the money needs to be there for FY23. That's all.
Why is it brought up now for the budget adjustment? Or maybe it wasn't.
And is Senator Ram on natural resources, Senator Westman?
No.
No.
Has his-
I think this was mentioned in committee, and I can't, I'm not sure we took any sort of a position or anything. So I'm reluctant to say anything without talking to the chair.
Plus it's for 23 years, so if they've got money to get started, I don't see why it should be
Well,
in this.
Well, if we already have a position created and the person is in that position half-time, I think administratively, unless it's being split with somebody else half-time, we could administratively make it a full-time position. And if the money's in the 22 budget, we don't need to do anything until 23, if the base can't accommodate it. So Senator, I'm gonna defer that until we get a little bit more information, but maybe by the afternoon. But this is really very difficult when we don't have, to try to coordinate these requests that are coming in individually with the committee process. So we'll make a note of it and then we'll decide. It may very well be for 22, it's not an issue and it can be dealt with as proposed in the 23 budget. And I don't know where the senator is getting her information relative to the problem here.
I'll clarify from the administration's point of view what they were thinking, and that won't necessarily reflect what happened in the Senate, but I'll just, from the administration's point of view, let me make sure what I said was right, and I'll get back to you.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Stephanie, we have some other language that we need to roll through.
Yeah, we have a 50-page draft of the language that we could very quickly walk through because everything that we want to stop on is in green. And that was sent out by Chrissy earlier. And so I'm assuming that folks have that access to the document. And if they don't, we'll send it again.
Would you all like me to just send it right now so you have it at the top of your email?
Yep.
Oh, Stephanie's at her office.
Yeah, I just gotta get my blinds down. It's got a little glare behind me.
So I just sent it all to your email, so it should be in the top of your email, and it's also posted to the web for anybody who is listening in.
You just send it?
I
Yeah.
did.
So. How do we open it? Okay. Have it.
You have it. It's titled, it's the As Passed House Senate Amendment, Senate Appropriations Amendment.
Okay, I've got it.
It has the green at the top, Senate Appropriations Proposal of Amendment.
It does, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay. All right, then
Okay,
everybody's
everyone
got the
has-
document.
Yep.
Okay.
The
All
first
right.
stop is on page 2. This is in lines 5, the $25 million that is the stabilization fund, the general fund for the healthcare system, where the House had carved out lines 8 through 13, specifically the $12 million matched by the 5.2 within that 25, now being replaced in lines 14 through 20. So we're just showing you the struck language. When the bill is done, it won't be there. But this is the agreed upon language with the Agency of Human Services and the nursing home folk about expediting and looking at the issues.
So committee, to give you background, once you had a carve out for traveling nurses, then we started getting, well, what about VNAs? What about, other groups? So I had a follow-up conversation with the Laura Pelosi, who represents the nursing homes. And because we were like, if we're using a needs-based approach toward these grants, then that's one time, but their real concern is the fact that they're subject to rate setting and their base is 2019, and the cost of labor is so out of joint that what we agreed upon is that they would apply for the stabilization funds, go through the review and get that one-time relief based on the criteria and the individual circumstances of nursing homes, but that we would add this language indicating that a methodology for addressing the cost and get back to us, which would deal with their financial stability in a longer term way. So that's language that was as a result of my follow-up based on our conversation here in appropriations about the carve out, and then subsequently other people wanting to have their carve out, so to speak, to let the process go forward around making an individual case, application specific determination on need, but deal with the system funding as a whole by this rate setting examination and the language that we have here. So I just want to put the language here in the context of our earlier discussion and what action and what discussions occurred after that.
And if folks are okay with as it's drafted there, if we scroll to the top of page 3, I've also included a new sub B. This is administrative. This allows the funds in this one-time 25 million to flow through Medicaid if they decide that it can flow through Medicaid, so that you can draw the federal match. And that happens under this transfer authority that we include in the budget, and they report on it at the end of the year. But I think it's important to allow them to let these general go to Medicaid. If, for example, they solve the nursing homes through the rate structure, you want to maximize the federal dollars in Medicaid to do that. And so this is just the administrative ability to do that in sub B.
Mm-hmm. Which obviously, if we can leverage Medicaid dollars as we go through this process, we want to do that. So that's the rationale for that language.
That sounds good.
All right.
And then if we scroll down to the middle of page 4, we're in the midst of the general fund one-time list in these pages. Number 30, you talked about, that's a new section, 150 to the independent schools for the vaccine that was mentioned in the letter from the administration. So
that was in the last paragraph, I guess, wasn't it? Mm-hmm.
Yep. So that's 150 in number 30. There's also 150 in number 31. This is through the Agency of Commerce and Community Development for the town of New Haven for the residual cost on moving the railroad station. Mm-hmm. And I'm making it clear that's in addition to any other funding that they've gotten for the project.
Yeah. And historic preservation, I followed up, and the gap was 200,000. At that point, historic preservation said they could cough up another 50. So they moved their contribution from 50 to 100,000. So the 200,000 gap that needed to be filled was reduced by that additional 50. So it brought it down to 150. And I would recommend that we fully fund the move of the building, which is what we agreed. If we paid for 2/3, we ought to get it finished up. Senator Sears, I hope you're feeling okay. Are you? just let us know if you're not feeling well or need to leave.
I think he's froze.
I think he's frozen.
Doesn't have his earphones in either.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess he's not hearing a thing we're saying. We'll keep going then.
So we're
So,
on top of page 5.
yeah,
Number 32, we talked about this on Friday. This is the $500,000 to the Green Mountain Care Board to engage a consultant for the benchmarking that was recommended by Donna Kinzer, the consultant to the HROT committee through the fall.
yeah. And this really is to help us understand our costs relative to other benchmark plans or states, so that we can target our areas of higher spending and understand where they are and how they can be best addressed.
Number 33, you see that here in yellow because we were, anticipating the conversation you had at the top of this meeting. We will appropriate the $1 million of general fund to ACCD for the match for the EDA. It will be specific to the two, what's in Joan's memo for the scale up and the other one, so that it's an equal split between those two proposals.
That's how I understand what the administration was proposing, and the committee has not indicated to me that that what they want is that, because of timing, move that up. And I know that, there was a request for more money, but we have not taken testimony, and that's not what we got for a request. It was to move the $1 million in the 23 budget up to the 22 budget adjustment. Senator Seer, so you're back with us.
Well, I may be for just a second because my Wi-Fi is really gone. I got thrown out of judiciary 3 times, and I think I better reboot my Wi-Fi and I'll be back. But I also may not be here that long. I'm in quite a bit of pain.
Yeah, that's what I understood. So please take care of yourself.
Oh, I will. But I think I got to reboot my Wi-Fi because it keeps throwing me out of Zoom meetings.
Okay. Well, I had that problem and I still couldn't get back in, so I had to move next door, fortunately.
Well, I don't think my neighbors would appreciate me coming over.
Well, my neighbor is a little different than yours.
Yeah, I understand.
So we're going to split it up. We're just moving what was proposed in the governor's budget for 23 into 22.
Yes.
Okay.
Now we're scrolling to page 7. We're near
So
the
we
top.
need to, 33 needs to be expanded a little bit.
It
more.
will. We will draft it as you've discussed it. We just didn't want to. It was not a decision made by the committee yet, so that's why it's sort of in a cryptic note here.
All right.
If we move to page 7, it's actually, I just realized this is in the wrong spot, but it looks like we're moving number 12 up to 6.7. It's number 13 that's supposed to move up to 6.7 for the state liability that you agreed to last week. Number 12 stays at $5 million.
12 stays at 5 and 13 moves
becomes
to
6.7.
Okay, so you just put it the
We put
higher
it
amount
against
on
the wrong
envelope.
5 million, just
Okay.
visually a typo.
And that was something we agreed to do, that we wanted
Yeah.
to get those accounts cleaned up, and now is
Yeah.
the time to do it.
And that's the amount that was recommended by the administration initially
Yeah. Okay.
for the liability, the self-insurance
Mhm.
liability fund.
Mhm.
Down on line 11, number 16, this is also what you agreed to last week to clean up the deficit in the correctional industries
Mhm.
internal service fund of 1.877.
Yeah.
And then on line 13, number 17, this is us not letting a deficit be created in the cannabis regulatory fund. So this is transferring 850, which is the amount you're appropriating out of that fund in FY22. So you're keeping the fund as the structure of funding the board, but you are not letting a deficit grow in that fund in FY22.
That's what we agreed to do, plus add the additional positions. So the House had 3, we added 5 more for 8, and then we'll deal with the remainder in 23.
Okay.
Committee all set on that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
On page 8, line 5, this is moving the legislative reversion back down to $435,000 because you'll see later in the bill, and based on the recommendation of the Senate Institutions Committee, that you are going to do the State House planning and schematics and design out of ARPA funding, ARPA SFR funding. And so not reverting the legislature's reversion, carry forward. And I think because we have a lot of space moving issues coming up in the summer, that's the concern as well, being able to cover those costs.
The 1.5, Stephanie?
I'm sorry?
Is that the 1.5 for the?
Yeah, it is the
Uh-huh.
1.5. That's the difference you see between 1.9 coming back down to 435.
And Senate appropriation, Senate institutions did have a vote. It was 3-2, but there was concern about why were we not using federal funds to support the planning and this work rather than general fund from the legislature's budget. So that's why we're using the federal funds rather than general fund. Okay, I'm looking at people.
There's no change for several pages until we get to page 12.
Oh, that's good. I like moving right along.
And what you'll see is section 52 as a deleted section compared to the House. And the House had reserved the $50 million that is going with the pension fund. The pension bill as it's drafted is appropriating the $50 million. And so on the Senate side, we're going to carry that in the other bill, not in the BAA. And so we're not going to have it reserved and unreserved in the same year. We're simply going to appropriate it in FY22 in the pension bill. And so that's why it's coming out here, because it's carried in another bill.
And then we would unreserve the 150 from last year. So it'll show very clearly in the pension bill the total of 200,000,
Exactly.
200 million for the underfunding of the pension systems.
And it will
So
also show that 13.3 million coming in from the ed fund to start the pre-funding on the teachers' healthcare.
Yeah.
And then scrolling on to page 13, this is the end of year construct. We call this section 53. And so you see highlighted in yellow, 85 or $80 million. I believe you're going to land at $81 million. We'll double check the math before we finalize this, but I think that's the number you're probably going to land on. The main change here in sub A, the House had it shall be used for this purpose. I changed that to a may, because you still have to build the 23 budget. And so you don't have to go, if you decide to allocate it slightly differently than for IIJA, you don't have to go and notwithstand or amend what you've done here. If you leave it permissive, it's may.
particularly when everything is still so fluid in terms of final decisions for FY23.
Yep. And then new sections here, starting on line 8, where this is, I don't like to use the word, but in the waterfall position. So if money comes in higher than expected in this year, in 22, it has nothing to do with changing anything permanently, but just for this year, if money comes in higher than expected, then we would, in line 12, you see fund another 5 million in the property management fund. It gets to the 10 million total. And then also do $20 million of the callable bonds. That wouldn't be known until July, but they'd be in position to execute these two pieces.
And the governor had proposed funding both of these requests. And but of course, the governor's budget didn't have the 50 million that we had put in our pension negotiations. So what we're doing is recognizing that we, the importance of getting these payments made, but we're doing it at with anticipation that if there is money at the end of this fiscal year, that's how we would address the additional 5 million to make it 10, and then the 20 million on callable bonds. So that was a way of recognizing the governor's request and importance, but still accommodating our 50 million for the pension additional payment.
And then in sub C, which starts on line 20 and goes on to the next page, that is simply allowing anything that comes in above the 25 million this year to just stay in the general fund and carry forward, and you would deal with it when you're back next year. So it wouldn't run to the,
Well,
the
whoever is back.
whoever is back. Yes.
Now, do we wanna leave them any extra money, or shouldn't we spend it so they'd have to
So
start
this,
where we
this is
did
not money
back?
that's this is not money that's in the forecast right now. This is money that would come in above our expectation. It would come in above the $25 million that you've just allocated above. So that is simply saying, don't let it go to a reserve. Don't let it go to the state employees OPEB, which is the underlying statute, because we're changing that in the pension bill for 23, obviously. It would simply stay in the general fund and carry forward from 22 to 23, and whoever is back next year.
The money will be there to work with.
Section
Okay.
53 on page 14, line 3. This is language that allows it's statutory change, but allows the bonds to be redeemed. So it's being included here in anticipation. You know, if we actually redeem 20 million, this is the authority to do that.
Mhm. Okay, so if the money's there, then this authorizes the redemption.
Section 54, now we're in this is the emergency housing language. And so this was one of the ones that was still being worked on.
And
The
committee, you may
version on-
remember when Representative Hooper came in, they had removed the language because this has to do with emergency housing, and we're trying to figure out how to make sure that with the ERAP, which is Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and it came to us in 2 slugs. One was first one was 200 million. I think the second one was 150. But if we don't spend the money, it'll get clawed back. And so there was, this was what Commissioner Brown was talking about, how to make sure that we're using all that rental money. And then the housing advocates were very concerned that there not be a gap or whatever, that there be a smooth transition from FEMA, which is 100% right now, to this ERAP program. Because if we don't spend all the money, then it jeopardizes our ability to use other sections of that ERAP money that would go toward affordable housing. So it got really complicated. And we've been working with DCF and working with the chair of House Appropriations. And because there's a work group to come up with language that makes it clear in terms of how we sequence those 100% federal dollars, FEMA versus this ERAP program. And I'm sure you're all glazed over by now, but we've been working to make it all fit. So it's with that reminder of the discussion, and that was something that got sort of deferred by the House, knowing more work had to be done, but it's something we've been working on collaboratively in the last week or so.
And even today, we had a
That's right, and even today.
DCF, and Katie McGlynn in the council and Representative Jessup have also been working on a response to the DCF version from this morning. And I think we're getting there. I'm just, at the moment, I'm not quite sure which version. We're very clear about the sequencing of the ERAP, not wanting anyone to fall through, and just making that as clear as possible. And also the fact that the occupancy agreements are something DCF facilitates on behalf of the clients, but they're not a signatory. So they didn't like the word negotiate. So we're trying to get that statement cleared. So this section 54 is a section that we knew, this is the version from last Friday, I believe.
So should we defer it until we've got the final?
I think
version?
Yes, that one, I think it's still open and needs the final version. Everyone on section 54A on line 12, that one's all set, that exemption. We just need to get 54 right. They go together, but 54 is where the real wordsmithing is happening still, on balancing the need to maximize ERAP and the need to make sure that everyone's covered, and the process around the emergency rules for the transitional program is what people want.
But the additional language number 8 on line 17 about having this new ERAP program would have the same occupancy. So it deals with that tenant landlord issue of concern. And it would take what the provision that exists in GA now and would have it also apply or to this new program as well. That's
section 54A on the bottom
Yeah.
of 16 and on to 17.
And you can see very clearly it's time limited. It's for the period of that specific program. And that was a concern that DCF had, was to make it clear that just like as with GA, that the payment of the room at a motel does not establish a landlord-tenant relationship. So this has been reviewed, and there'll be a few more tweaks.
Yes.
And then hopefully we can finish it up by the
Yeah.
end of today.
Yes. Then going down on page 17 to section 56 onto page 18, at the top of page 18, you see the sub B that was there being struck. That is because we're appropriating this $1.5 million in another part of the bill, in the ARPA part of the bill. The House had
I'm sorry,
appropriated.
Stephanie, you're on page 17?
At the bottom of page 17 onto the page, on the top of page 18.
Uh-huh.
This is simply
Okay.
the 1.5 for the State House.
Mhm.
It's the House had appropriated the general fund after reverting it from the legislature. This keeps the State House language intact, but it simply moves the appropriation into ARPA. That's why it's being struck
Yeah.
here.
Okay. All right.
Down at the bottom of page 18, you decided last week to strike section 58.
Mm-hmm.
So you see that deleted at the top of page 19. On line 4 on page 19, section 59, this is where you're creating 8 positions. You're creating them new. You're not transferring them from the pool in the Cannabis Control Board. And you can see the listed titles of the positions.
Okay, so those are the 8.
Yeah,
we
and
agreed
those
on.
are your extra, that plus their associated costs through the remainder of the year is the extra $200,000 that you see in the Cannabis Control Board line.
Mhm.
And then sections 59A and 59B are the timing requirements that were in the other bill. Senator Sears, I think, has left us, but that you had instructed us to include these in the BAA because of the timing.
You're talking about page 20?
I'm talking about the bottom of page 19, section 59A, implementation of medical cannabis registry. That's being moved to July 1, 2022 at the top of
Yeah.
page 20.
Yeah,
And
that's
then-
what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and then the effective date that goes with that in section 59B.
Yeah, I'm back. I
Okay.
had to-
Okay, that deals with the time frame and the extension. Okay,
Yeah.
and I think that's using the language you provided.
Yes, from what I heard,
It's taken straight out of the other bill.
yeah, that's what we need.
Okay, so we've dealt with the time extension. We've dealt with paying the cost of the board for 22, and we have authorized the 8 positions, not throwing them in competition with the pool that mean maybe having fewer resources or positions to carry out the other functions of state government before we added a new one. So I think that takes care of cannabis. I'm just looking at the
Think so.
committee. Okay. All right. Then
Page-
we'll keep going.
Page 21, about halfway down, section 60A. This is the directive to amend the Medicaid plan to seek coverage for 12 months of postpartum for eligible individuals. So this doesn't come with any money in 22, but it will have a 23 impact, but that impact is actually included in the governor's budget already.
Mhm. And the program is good for 5 years. It becomes effective, the option, April 1st. And we got communication from DEVA that because of programming, they thought it would be, they could start implementing it early next year. So just to let you know, so the startup is going to be midway in the fiscal year, and I'm sure what the administration put in the 23 budget is reflective of that start date. Okay, any questions? We'll just keep grinding away here.
Sure, we're halfway through already on the 50 pages. So page 23, there's just a small technical change on line 6. This is in the ESSER funds. That the change that's on line 8 came over from the House, and you agreed to that. What was missing was the actual $1 million down on line 2. The governor had carried that in his 23 bill in the effective on passage section, so somehow they got diverged from each other. But this puts all the ESSER 1, so there's no change in the total amount of ESSER 1 money. It's just the changes that you see between number 2 and number 3.
Okay, so we took $1 million from 2 and put it on 3 for
Yep.
state level needs. Okay.
And then there's no change until we get down to page 24. And this is where, based on the conversation that you had at the end of last week and at the top of this meeting about the technical education centers, 65A appropriates the 1.725 ed fund dollars. As I would like the committee members to read this and make sure that it does what you want it to do. I have left it as specifying the amounts. And what I've specified is the highest amount, either from the administration's plan or the what came over from the House for the 3 independents. So the Southwest Career Center is different than it came over from the House. It's higher number. It's the number that was in the distribution plan as submitted as part of the $1.5 million. And then I've allowed everything else to go out on that 3-year average that was proposed when Heather Bushy was in earlier in the month, walking you through their proposal.
So the only change from the 3 is Southwest, which actually gives them more than what would have been the case in their letter of request for the 3 independents. And then we are going to make payments to all the centers.
I think we need a little bit of wordsmithing on line 11 to 12. I think the grant shall be made proportionally based on the fiscal year 2019 through 21 average head count.
Stephanie, can you hear me?
Yep.
I am wondering, and I clearly just missed it, but why are we not using a single metric if we're funding all 17?
Well, that is a question for the committee to decide. I got the impression Senator Campion was in and said, we support what they did on the 3 independents. So I decided, maybe we go with the 3 independents and then do the others the way that administration provided. The option to appropriate 1.725.
That's a decision we could make. We could.
Well, I bring it up is because I think Brian was speaking to the proposal to make the 3 independents, recipients of some of the money. But now we've decided, having looked into it, that we've got 17 in need. We're gonna fund all 17. It just seems odd to me that we would use average head count for 14 of those, and then a different metric for the independents.
My recollection of his testimony was he supported what the House did.
Well, right, but they weren't going to fund all 17. Right?
Well, we can make it proportional. That's a choice that we can make and say everybody's going to be treated the same. And then we can negotiate with the House if they disagree, because obviously they didn't give any relief to the non-independents.
I think the problem is we've had 3 different proposals for how to do this. And now we've landed on funding everybody consistently. And it seems
except for them.
Sorry?
Yeah.
except for the 3 as it's drafted here, but you could actually just end after on line 12.
We
Right.
could. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you want to make that recommendation, Senator Baruth, that we just have a standard formula that applies to all the centers, regardless of whether they're independent or not?
That's what I would recommend.
Okay.
But
Senator
isn't-
Westman?
Isn't there a big difference between Southwest Career at 140 and River Valley Technical at 251? Do we know what the rationale was in the House for making them? So
They took the figures that were requested in the letter that was sent by Representative James on behalf of the 3 independents. So,
I mean, we had an early
I thought
advocacy.
it was student count.
The Agency of Education proposal is based on a 3-year average of head count. So they look at 3 years, average it, and then everything's proportional based on that. That's the Agency of Ed. And I sort of made a Frankenstein version of the agency proposal and the House's proposal.
I would support Senator Baruth's move to make everybody treated the same.
okay.
So that move means the three, well, would be, okay, so everybody would be equal, I see, all right.
Yeah, everybody would be equal. You'd use the same formula to determine the level of the grant for all 17.
Okay, but
So not-
will these
what-
three still get this money that's listed here?
No,
No.
probably River Valley would not get as much.
So what, Stephanie, what would that average out per unit?
I'll go back and look at the distribution sheet from AOE. I can't remember the amount, but you're upping the amount a little bit because you're going up from 1.5 to 1.725. So everyone's per head count number would go up.
What'd you say, 1.725?
So you see at the top on line 9, the amount
Yeah.
of money you're appropriating is actually higher than the amount of money that the administration originally proposed. It's $225,000.
If we have 17 units, I think somebody has said, if there's 17 units and we got 1.7,
Yeah, but we're not distributing it, dividing simply by 17. We're looking at the student count.
Yeah,
And which would vary depending on the
Yeah.
is
center.
that
So
what you said,
distribution
Bill?
sheet. There is a distribution sheet for the 1.5, and it would be, roughly 20% higher than on that distribution sheet that we got in early January. We can send that around again. Chrissy, if you can lay your hands on that distribution sheet.
It's not going to, Bob, I don't think it's going to affect anybody getting less. It's just going to put it according to one consistent formula so that we're not continuing a process of using different ways of calculating that were created by the fact that they got screwed over originally.
Yes.
I have my sheet in
Yeah.
my extra handy filing cabinet. And what it does is look at the percent of state average head count. So Burlington Tech, 5%. North Country has 11%. So you have varying allocations, and part of the reason for using head count is the argument that they couldn't recruit because of COVID, and that influenced the number of students. So I think that's probably part of why the methodology used for how that 1.5 would be distributed is based on the head count and the percent of the state average head count. So we were given this document, and I happen to have it in my budget adjustment folder. So under that, there's great variation. For example, North Country, that has 11% of the state average head count, gets about 165,000. On the other hand, Southwest gets 140. They're 9% of the head count. So that's the formula is based on the head count.
No,
So-
let's go
Well, it
for it.
would appear from that Southwest made a request based upon head count, and and Hannaford did not,
Yeah, that's true.
because Southwest is just a, so I just think we're better to be consistent across the board, just as Senator Bruce suggests.
Yeah, there's quite a difference, and I don't, well, Hannaford would get, but these are a little bit higher because we're putting in a little more money. Would have gotten about 116. But the big one is why River Valley was so much higher.
I mean, that's the
Um,
fellow who wrote.
What?
He submitted testimony and testified before education. Maybe they could just educate us on that.
Well, I would just say, I think probably the Agency of Education thought about how to be fair to everybody from the start, and they had a formula. I don't want to base something just upon the fact that everybody starts from a different point and makes a different request.
I just, the only thing is, did they use 2020 in the head count? They all should be getting more if indeed 2020 was part of the head count, because that's where they had trouble.
The averages are the enrolled students in 2019 through 2021.
Yeah, so there's 2020 in there.
But that is the formula used for everybody.
I get it. We should
So
give,
absolutely, and if we have a recommendation to just have a standard formula and everybody get the same
Percentage.
percentage based on the number of students that they of their head count. And there's no question, I don't know where River Valley is. Is that in your district, Alice?
yes, Springfield.
Oh, well, under what the governor proposed, they would have gotten 95,000.
Yeah, well, the governor's was lousy.
Well, that was 1.5 million and it was treating everybody the same.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's give,
I don't know if there was something very unique and compelling. Obviously, what the Agency of Education had was not, and I don't know whether the House vetted the difference or whether there was something unique about that CTE. But I would say if we go with a uniform formula and treat everyone the same, we increase the 1.5 to 1.725. And if there's a problem here, then we can deal with it in budget adjustment in our negotiations, because the House didn't give anything to any of the other centers except the 3 independents.
okay.
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. Okay. All right.
So I think we're clear on what you want there. We'll strike that. We'll end it on line 12. It's all going to be proportional.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Then we move on. Okay,
And
sorry.
I just want to be sure, we had Senator Baruth moved that we use a standard formula and distribute accordingly. Senator Westman agreed. I know that Senator Nick is concerned about why that River Valley was so much higher, but I'm sure that we will be hearing why they should be treated so much differently than the other centers. And Senator Starr, Senator Sears, are you all right with going with everybody using a standard formula and distributing it based on the average head count?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, then we will amend that section and just leave us that standard, that formula in, and I'll have it apply to all the centers. So with that change, we will end it at, so we will delete lines 13 through 18.
Yes.
And at each center, period.
Yep.
Okay.
So then we're moving down to page 25. Section 68 is where we're amending the G300, the ARPA section that is investments in Vermont's economy, workforce, and communities. Line 18, we just want to make sure that the number lines up when we're done with the total amount that we're appropriating in this section. So that'll stay highlighted until we do our final double check. But as we go through,
That's probably giving Commissioner Gresham heartburn, but that's how it's ending up.
as we go through the changes that the Senate is making, actually online, the first one is on page 28, where section 24 is deleted. This is where the House had the 515,000 for the 3 CTEs we just talked about, because you're dealing with them in the section we just went through. I mean, you're dealing with the whole in the section we just went through, the whole universe of CTEs. And then we come down to on page 29, number 31 on line 7. And you'll see, we'll revisit this in another section, but this is where you are increasing the amount of money for from the ARPA funds for the $60 million retention and recruitment. We need the word recruitment.
I was going to say we're missing recruitment there.
The funding mix as a result of the conversations that you had last Friday is changing. You still want to remain at $60 million, but our conversations with AHM indicate that the Medicaid piece that we had thought was available under the House construct is not available because of the way the one-time bonus payments would work. There's not a way to put those through Medicaid and draw money. So the mix is changing here. So you see a dollar amount change on line 7. So half of the 60 million would come from these ARPA funds. And you'll see the other half in the program itself. And here you also see the 1.5 to BGS for the State House planning and schematics and design work. And then on number 33, this is the $2.6 million for the dairy risk management assistance program. You'll see the language later in the bill that was drafted by Michael Grady. But the appropriation is here in this section because it's ARPA dollars.
Okay, Bobby's been spending money, 2 million for working lands, and we'll raise your 2.6 for dairy.
Yeah. We should ask for more, but
Well,
I've been very cooperative and cheap and
Modest, mild.
no,
all right.
we did have the co-ops in this morning and they really thought that was a great thing to do for our farmers for what they've been through. And
Well, I brought that up at the legislative breakfast because there's this whole rural caucus about what they're doing. And I made a point that, we, many of us on this committee have been strong supporters of the rural economy over the years and, including the Rygate paper mill that keeps a market for low grade wood to what we've done over time in buying down loans, et cetera. And that, our most recent is a proposal for this premium assistance program. So we, I think, have a good track record around
very
the
good.
rural economy.
Just let me remind you, this will not be the last time Senator Starr comes to the committee asking.
Now that's not fair, Richie.
It's amazing what Star's able to get.
I know, isn't it? Huh?
It's
Well, you've
really,
got-
Shot.
Well,
it's
you've
really
got your 8
sad.
cannabis positions.
Right. Yeah, I get cannabis people. He gets the entire dairy industry. It's really sad that there'll be no more North Troy, that it's heading to Quebec.
Oh, you're going to change the U.S. boundary line, put me right into Canada.
Right. We think it would be easier.
Yeah, but
You
I
can
don't
get a
know if I
rider.
can handle.
They call it a rider up in Quebec. You can be the rider from Stansted.
I told you the other day, if you did that, they'd probably elect me to go to Parliament, and I don't know if I could handle all that yelling and screaming they do in there.
Well,
your government.
But
The
that was
advantage would be
England.
they do it in French, Bobby, so you wouldn't have to.
we're going back to housing and homelessness investments, which.
Yeah, and so that's it. We're on page 30, line 3. You see that going down $20 million from what the House passed? That is
Yeah, because we put it in as 210.
Yes, that's all that's happening there.
Yeah.
At the bottom of, you see that coming out on the page 30, top of page 31. That struck language is actually being replaced by the stars that you see on line 4. It won't be in the bill. We just wanted to make sure you saw it.
Mhm.
And then there's a technical correction on line 6 and line 10 on page 31. You are doing 70 million, the 40 that was done in 21. We needed to run the 30 separately because it's FY22 money, not 21 money. The House had, when we drafted it for the House, we had accidentally not done the fiscal years correctly. We put it with 21, but 21 is closed.
Okay.
So we just have
This is-
to run the 30 million of additional general fund for VHCB correctly in the correct fiscal year.
Okay. And remember, the House did that because general fund
guidance.
would allow for leveraging of the tax credits and support more housing to be done. And you can't do that with the ARPA funding based on the guidance. So that's why, although VHCB is still trying to negotiate and through our congressional delegation to see if that could be changed, but that's the ruling as of now. So that's why the general fund was put in, was to give that leverage for those tax credits and end up with more money for housing. I'm looking at the committee. We'll keep going.
Yep.
Okay.
That brings us to page 32, section 72. And this is the redraft of the workforce recruitment and retention program, the $60 million program. This goes on for a few pages. This was the draft that Jen Carby did based on the information the chair and I gave her over the weekend from your discussion on Friday. And so this is one of the committee members, I think, will want to read through and make sure that the folks they expect to see included are included, the structure, which is needs-based, not a per FTE amount. And then I can walk through the funding section toward the end of it if folks would like to.
So Jen Carby was suggesting that we needed to specify eligible employers. And of course, our concern is that we make it, that we not leave something out. I know it's really important to Senator Sears that, for example, the group homes were not included in what the House did. And so we tried to make sure that we were, that this list was capturing all the different eligible employers. So this is our effort. And once again, this is needs-based. We had that conversation. I think there's a tendency to conflate this with our hazard pay, everybody gets something. And this is based on the testimony that we got from the secretary. Some of the ways that it was constructed in the House actually wasn't even feasible, they were telling us, because providers serve different populations that are funded, differently. So it's really important that, once again, where it's an application process, they would have criteria established, and the providers would be applications would be determined based on the needs as they exist for that particular provider entity. We ended up making a list, although that made us a little nervous that we might not have 100% perfection. On the other hand, once we get this out, if an entity feels that they should be in the list and we feel that they should, we can always do it, when we finalize it. Yes, Senator Starr.
Yeah, I was wondering, maybe I'm backing everybody up, but when we talked about the retention for our healthcare workers and that a few minutes ago, we got quite a lot of money involved in there at 60 million or something like that. does that pertain to only Vermont employed health workers? The retention part, because are we going, could any of that money be going to these out of state, like visiting nurses, or is it going to be used to retain our own workforce here in Vermont?
Well-
I'm a little late in asking that, but
Well, I don't think we want a retention bonus for contract nurses. What we want to do is actually reduce the need for those expenses. So the answer to that is no, the retention would be related to employees of that provider.
okay. Yeah,
And we also talked about that we needed to do both recruitment and retention, because if you've got a 40% vacancy rate, you really have got to address, you got to do everything you can to start reducing your vacancy experience. So this is, don't forget, we have the 25 million. I guess we gigged it up to 30 for stabilization. No, the 25 is general fund.
25 is
is-
general fund stabilization.
And that's provider stabilization. And then the 60 million, of which 30 is
retention and
is retention and recruitment.
yeah.
So this is the list we ended up with. Jen Carby kind of went through and tried to make sure that it was a good inventory. But if we've missed someone, I'm sure.
I've just here to make clear that the DCF therapeutic group homes are included, because I don't know if they fall under residential care homes on line 19, or if they need to be specifically listed.
Okay. Well, we absolutely want to make sure that they are on.
And then the adult days, I'm not sure if they are covered by what's in sub 8.
I don't know, but they should be listed as well.
For licensing purpose, you might just check with DCF and how they categorize the different license programs.
Okay. You mean as you're talking about your group homes?
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing that I think we're talking about evidence that, they've had a 40% turnover in staff and they have, half the positions are open. That would certainly be a case versus some organization that has had little turnover and has 100, all staff are full.
And that was the argument, Senator Sears, that the agency said, the need could be very disparate, and this allows them to be evaluated based on the criteria used. So it provides the relief where it's needed the most. And so you're absolutely right on that. So Stephanie, we will double check because we want to make sure that those group homes, which are under PNMI, are definitely on the list. And the other was the adult days.
Yeah, and I want to make I believe the recovery centers are included. The substance use disorder treatment providers are, but I just want to make sure you want recovery center employees covered as well.
I think we better. I don't know what the need will be, but I don't want to predetermine or preclude it.
Okay.
And I am unanimous in that.
Yeah.
Unanimous.
Give me a thumbs up if you agree. We want to make sure our list is included. Okay. All right. So we'll keep going.
Is that thumb broke, Phil?
Oh,
On
mine was up.
page 34, we're treating the independent care workers the same as the House did. It's consistent with their CBA and through the ERIS.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's consistent with their process. And then in sub D, defining the intent for eligible employers to use funds for recruitment and retention. They're still afforded flexibility, but it's that needs-based process at the top.
Yeah.
So there'll be some tie to their application probably.
Yeah, I just see that that's the best link to make sure the money's being
Yeah.
directed, that we are providing some directive with the money and how it
Yeah.
goes out. That wasn't quite that well defined.
On page 35 on line 4, this was something you wanted to make sure was included to the extent that an employee gets a payment under this. If they're an employee that their income level is that they're receiving some sort of public benefit, we don't want the retention payment to bounce them off of the benefit program if we or change the level of benefit that they get if we are able to exempt it.
Yeah.
SNAP is probably the one place we won't, maybe not be able to. We probably could, if it's a one-time payment, we might be able to. If it's an ongoing payment, it might not.
Yeah, that's right. One time.
And then also on page 35 in sub E on line 10, this is where the $60 million is coming from now. I believe the version you have in front of you is showing online. So it's $60 million and we're allowing 1.5% of it to be used for administrative costs up to. It doesn't mean so that would be $900,000 of this 60 million. And then 25.
And we do have some experience about the administrative costs because of the hazard worker pay process that had to be administered. So it's giving, if you're giving out six and you're doing these individual reviews, setting up the criteria and the applications, you really does take some resources to support it.
And then the source of the $60 million in sub 1, 25 million, this was $18 million in the House, is coming from the home and community-based service plan. So that's the 10% bump that was in ARPA that we're going to see a bit more in the next section. So 25 is coming specifically from that one-time 3-year pot of investment to strengthen home and community-based services. And so that was a number that was 18 in the House. Number 2 is $5 million of general
Ask a
fund.
question, Stephanie.
Yep.
Yes.
On all of this and anything that's to do with recruitment and retention, most companies that I'm aware of will make the payment after you've, they give you an upfront bonus, say of $500. And then if you stay a year, you're going to get $2,500. So the money may not be spent even in this fiscal year coming up.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that accounted for in there so that they?
So I believe that the money, we are allowing money to carry forward, but also if they're awarding the grant, they're obligating the dollars. And once the money is obligated, it will carry forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Because that could very well happen. I think that's similar to what the corrections did with their side agreement. So then we wanted to make sure that we had the commitment, right?
The commitment is, we asked Jen to include that. I want to go back up to the top.
That, employees, if they're getting a retention bonus, there's a commitment that they would work for an additional 12 months. And I think that was,
I'm not seeing it in sub A. I thought we were going to put that in sub A.
Right at the top of page 35.
yeah, it's up there.
Oh, yes. Okay, there it
Yeah,
is.
it is there. Yeah, thank you, Bobby. Yeah. Because we'd agreed that we wanted that with the money, there had to be a commitment for,
Yeah,
because that's the whole purpose of the money was to keep that position filled.
and that's in reverse of what Senator Sears was saying. What he was talking about, you give them a little up front and don't pay them the balance until their time is up. But I think this is fine the way you have it.
Well, they're making a commitment, and then if they want to split it up and you get some up front, and then at the end of 12, you can end up in the same place.
Yeah, so I think it's fine.
Yeah, okay. So now we're down to page 36.
So, yeah, at the top, at the bottom of page 35 is the 5 million of general fund. This was formerly 60 million of Medicaid, so 7 of it was general fund. So you're actually saving a little bit of money here in terms of the general fund. And then a number 3 on page 36 is the 30 million we saw previously out of ARPA funds. So the 30, the 25, and the 5 make up your $60 million.
So committee, just to let you know, this is a split that Stephanie and I worked on over the weekend to get to the 60 million after discussion about what we could use for Medicaid and the limitations. And so this is how we would configure the different funding pieces to get to a total of the 60 million, which is what the House had. This is just different. As Stephanie said, it's the funding has been modified. Okay. There's no such thing as weekends anymore.
Yeah, you guys didn't spend much time in church. I can see that.
Well, maybe Stephanie did. Maybe there's some higher power at work here.
And then in sub F on lines 9, this is we want a status report in April on the program. And then we wanted reporting back. And I actually think I did not report back to Jen to have the recruitment and retention payments where we want to be specific, not just on the maximum min, but how the success of the recruitment efforts.
Yeah,
I
right.
think what's still missing from this, we will add that specifically.
Because we talked about, we wanted to see how successful we were in recruitment. Yeah. Okay. So that would go.
It would probably go on line 17, after continued employment and something, we'll figure out where it goes, but it goes between lines 15 and 17, I believe.
Okay.
We just have to we want to keep everything that's there. We just want to be specific about some reporting back on the success of the recruitment efforts, how much was spent and how many people were successfully recruited.
Okay. Yeah, we want to have some numbers to go with that. All right, we'll just expand that a little bit more because we would like to have some data on how successful those recruitment, that funding, was it a successful tool? Otherwise, are people okay with the language?
Yeah.
Okay. So are you keeping a list, Stephanie?
I am, and I'm marking up in front of me, and I'm sure Chrissy is also marking up.
Okay. All right. Then we'll move on to
Page 37, section 72A is a new section. This was also worked on over the weekend. The administration had included a version of this in their proposed language in December. We had advised the House not to include a version of it because there wasn't time quite to work through how to draft this. And this has to do with the home and community-based service plan. This is the 10% bump that we've gotten for a year on everything we spend on home and community-based services. And that plan is about $146 million. Actually, there's a typo on line 6 here. That extra 6.
oh yes, there's too many zeros. Too many digits there.
And it's made up of 3 large components, and it stretches over, we can spend the money over 3 years, and they had an stakeholder engagement process through the summer and into the fall. And so the reason we were concerned is making sure that, to the extent that you influence this plan, we wanted to not grant sort of blanket carry forward authority and appropriations. So we're laying out the components of the plan in A, so you can see that. Sub B has to do with the general fund that's being generated on that 10% right now. That's the match for the $146 million. And this plan, this construct from the federal government and the ARPA bill comes with very strict reporting. So we generate the money from the 10% bump, but we have to really corral it. It can only stay in this home and community-based arena. And so sub B is corralling the state-generated savings that creates the basis to match up to get 146. And the estimate of
So what you say you're required to spend.
you're required to spend in this way, in this, in this universe of things that you can spend it on. And so the savings that we're projecting right now, and all the savings are in 22, is $65 to $69 million. And it's drafted so that they can transfer that savings into a new sort of lockbox of general fund, so that it's only the home and community-based service general fund match. So that's what sub B is doing. It's allowing that step first.
And that's not, none of this is in the House passed BAA.
No, it wasn't in the House passed BAA. It wasn't the governor's. It was just, it took a lot of time to get to where there's comfort level, both on what the Agency of Human Services needs for this plan and what we need in terms of you being able to follow it and grant the authority that you're comfortable granting year by year.
Okay.
They had looked to have the whole authority granted up front, and that, as your staff, made us kind of uncomfortable.
So
All
you'll
right.
be able to verify everything in a way that you've set it up.
Yeah, and for example, we've changed the plan. We have your budget right now allocates 25 million instead of 18 million for the retention, for the workforce piece. And so, we didn't want that. It's just trying to balance the needs across everyone involved in this. So this
And
is
also reflecting the requirements that come with that 10% bump.
Yeah.
And if anybody asks me any questions about this on the floor,
we'll get back
I'll
to
have
them with details.
Just
I'll
ask
just-
Stephanie.
yeah, well, when you're doing a budget presentation, you're not given that luxury. But I think I can confuse everybody sufficiently, so they'll just agree.
What we want to
suspect,
do is provide
you-
enough information in sub A that people could actually understand it is this $146 million to this universe of home and community-based providers for these three major components.
Mhm.
Just a little more than most of them about that.
And us too.
Well, I would include us in that, but besides this committee, she knows the gap between.
Oh, well, you don't want me to defer to someone else on the committee to answer this?
We'll defer to Bobby.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So
And
this is
I'll yield to Stephanie.
I won't be there. I'll be watching on YouTube.
all right. So it's basically setting out sort of the
Yeah.
framework for how the amount of money, how we're doing it within the confines or the requirements of the bump, and that we're using a bit more of this match generated for the recruitment and retention.
Yeah.
18 to 25.
And then you see on page sub C on page 38 is where you see the FY22 appropriations of this plan. And it's actually almost $59.5 million. We did on line 7, number 1, we have already appropriated 17.1 of this. You did that last year when you built the bill because we were aware of the 10%. The construct wasn't clear, but we were clear that we were going to have capacity there. And so you funded the 3% increase that you did for the DAs, the SSAs, including the ACCS and the Children's Integrated Service rate increases, the home and the home health rate increase.
So that was all out of the 146.6 million then.
Yes.
Okay.
And so we year by year, we're tracking the total appropriation. Then you see number 2 is the 25 million.
So in the end, how much do we have left that hasn't been out of that one
out of that one, so we've spent almost 60 million of the 146. So it's
Yeah,
like 86 million.
okay, that's all thank you.
The 25 million is the retention and recruitment piece. And then items 3 through 7 are the pieces of the plan that AHS is estimating can go out through these various departments in 22, the remaining pieces of the plan that can go out through 22. And then we'll see a similar construct to this section
23.
in 23.
Mhm.
And sub D is also sort of administrative flexibility that we're giving. These are actually global commitment dollars. They're just separate from the waiver because global commitment's how we match up in Medicaid. But it allows them, to the extent that these estimates are slightly different at the year end, to transfer the way we do within the global commitment. And it also allows them to obligate to bring the money forward from 1 year to the next in the plan.
So all these
because-
other appropriations there, we already have done.
So no, the number 1 you have done. Number
Yeah.
2 you have done in the retention. Numbers 3,
Right.
4, 5, and 6 are part of the either the allocation to improve services or the allocation to improve care through data systems and value-based payments and models and oversight. So
Okay.
these are the 3 through 7 are new spending in the plan. I can't remember if the committee probably didn't spend a lot of time on the PowerPoint that the AHS put together, submitted on the plan. But they're the pieces that AHS needs. It also happens to be roughly a $17.3 million number, needs for the remainder of 22 for money going out in addition to what we've already appropriated in 22 under the plan to the universe of home and community-based providers, or for other components that are internal to the plan.
Okay, yeah, somebody's gonna ask me what the 390 to Department of, to DEVA, I might.
Oh, we probably have that off a spreadsheet from them. So we can provide more detail if needed.
Would that be on the summary sheet that,
I believe it's on, there's a PowerPoint that they put together summarizing the home and community-based plan, the whole 146 by components and years. So we'll ask them for the updated version of that, because I think these numbers have been updated since that.
did Dale provide that when they were in?
I
Who
think
provided?
the secretary's office, we might not have gotten to it that day, but I think they had it available. I know they presented it in the House. They may have presented, so
Okay,
we'll make sure, but by Thursday you have the detail of the plan, so that in case a question comes up, we have the documentation from the agency that goes with it
okay.
available for folks.
I do have the Agency of Human Services supplemental. Is that in there then?
I think it was an additional document, so maybe it was an additional PowerPoint document to that.
Oh. All right, well then I don't think I
If
have
it's in
that.
there, I think their original ask was to have a full $85 million of spending authority to carry forward included. But that's changed under this.
Okay, all right, well. We'll keep going then, and we'll get,
Yep,
if you can get me the updated, that would help.
Yep. So the next change is on page 41 at the top of the page, section 76. This is annual carry forward authority. It just got omitted accidentally on the governor and House side. We need this in order to close the year. You don't want to, create perverse incentives for people to spend money because they think they're going to lose it. But we don't grant this authority in statute. You grant it every year so that you think about it, so that we understand that, you want to, especially when you start to build the 23, you want to understand what folks did carry forward.
Mhm.
And so it needs to be in the bill. It's an annual.
Okay. Oh, so the administration forgot it and the House forgot it, but we're remembering it?
Well, with Adam prompting me. I'll
Oh,
give due.
thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, now 77, I bet Senator Starr is going to pay attention. So this is basically taking the bill and the language that Michael Grady.
This is exactly what he drafted. The
Yeah.
only thing that's changed is he had an appropriation embedded and we moved that to the ARPA section.
Yeah.
And then we cross-reference back to this section
Okay.
with that $2.6 million.
All right. Well, I think we can close that out unless anybody wants to revisit.
No,
Okay.
that looks fine.
I thought you'd think so. All right.
Then we're
Now,
on-
this is the Barry TIF that I mentioned earlier that I suggested to the chair of finance and the lead sponsor of the bill, that the easiest thing would be to just strip that bill of the appropriation and put it in the budget adjustment.
Yeah, it's not really appropriation, it's a transfer. I find
Well, I
that-
mean, transfer, right?
Yeah. I
You
did.
can't appropriate, I remember.
Graham did inform us that the auditor, and it's probably a good idea to actually give some authority to actually do these small true ups without having to do it this way. You would do it netting in the tax lines of the ed fund as opposed to these transfers. So that's something for another committee to consider, so that you don't, these small housekeeping things do come up on occasion.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
authorizing them to, once they've, verified that the dollars.
Well,
are
that's
correct,
what the bill will do, is to give the authorization to
Authorization.
do it without,
having to do these
Yeah.
one-ofs.
yeah, okay. So this is a $20,962 transfer.
To true up the TIF overpayment.
Mhm.
Section seven.
But,
Sorry.
so it's transferred from the ed fund to the city of Barry. We don't transfer it to AOE then?
So that's why I think the transfer is an odd way to do it, but Abby Shepherd modeled it on two other instances and two other bills. They tend to be tax bills of where this type of true up happened for TIFs.
Okay,
It either didn't come through us or I didn't catch it, but it's a slightly unusual way
yeah, it sure is.
to do it.
I can't,
'Cause-
it's interesting. It sort of operationalizes the ed fund to make a transfer. So the ed fund's going to write a check. Okay. Well, anyway, we're taking care of the overpayment and getting the money to the city of Barry, and that will make our colleagues from Washington County very happy. So let's keep going. Mileage Smart.
Mileage Smart, see the change.
That was based on testimony and a request that they had in transportation, and that was the cost of administering the program was higher because the methodology had the admin index to the number of incentive payments made, and because of the whole market and the shortage of vehicles, the number of transactions turned out to be less, and the amount of work to deal with within this market was much more time consuming. So this is what we're amending, is the 10 up to 15% that was requested. Otherwise, Capstone was having to subsidize the operation of the program out of their own budget. So Alice, question?
Is this the low income electric car program?
Yeah, or it would also be high mileage vehicles that I think there's a threshold. Is it 40 miles per gallon, something like that? So it could be a plug-in hybrid. It could be a lot of Priuses. That's what we had.
But for right now, it's been mostly gas vehicles that are high mileage because there's not secondhand hybrids or electric cars. I think it's envisioned when they move to a next generation and there starts to be secondhand electric vehicles, and they'll move to that. But for right now, for low income people, because I think their grants are only like $5,000.
But that's what it's for, and it is for plug-in, or it could be the Priuses that aren't plug-in. but where the charging is off the regular engine, and it would be for high mileage, just regular gas powered vehicles.
Right.
But the
Yeah.
market's been very challenging because used cars have just been in such short supply.
Well,
Um,
and the other thing is, they've been overrun with people that are trying to get in the program.
So that is to recognize the cost of administering this program. And that was something Natural Resources were also involved in and putting in a bit more money to support this. I think it's recognizing that not all Vermont households have the same economic capacity to make this transfer into either a higher mileage or into hybrid vehicles. So
Yep.
now we're down to section 80, which was requested by Senate Finance as well, and they took testimony on it. And this allows us to continue what we did last year if the federal subsidies are extended. And this is language around the individual and small group markets. So we can go through that, but this is using the budget adjustment as the vehicle to recognize the possibility of a federal extension. For the separate, to really take advantage of the opportunities for the federal premium tax credits. Okay, that's language that was requested, and it obviously is a benefit to have access to the premium tax credits. Okay, well, I guess we're all set on that.
Now we're at
and-
the very end section of effective dates.
Oh, yeah.
The whole bill is effective on passage, except there's two that are retroactive. The section 73 and 74, which are the pieces that related to the old CRF stabilization grant program and the audit issues around what they did post the two tranches in terms of one of exigent COVID related issues. And then the other one is section 75, which was the omission of the small piece of the healthcare claims tax that did not get extended. That's retroactive to July 1st. There are
There's a lot of moving pieces to keep track of this year.
Yeah.
It just seems like it's been more than ever.
There's a couple
So
of
we-
pieces tacked onto the back of the bill. Just disregard those. Those were just in case you wanted to see what the House had passed in section 72 and in the CTE ARPA language. Those won't be there. I was just in case somebody wanted to look at those. So what I have outstanding is the correction to the CTEs, which is clear, the correction to the retention and recruitment piece, both double checking that everyone's included and that correction to the reporting back on recruitment success. And then the other big one that's outstanding is the housing.
Yeah.
Which
And the other, a couple of things that I wanted to mention. We had an amendment that was sent to me Friday afternoon. And the way it was written was not the way it was intended. And it would have a requirement that prevailing wages that are using the same construct that we have for the capital bill would apply to ARPA funded projects. But there was no cost threshold. So it would have made any project with ARPA funding subject to this prevailing wage, which is not only prevailing wage, but comes with a 42% benefit package requirement. And so the thought was to put in a threshold for projects so that they would be higher costs. Capital bills are higher. My question was, well, does that threshold include materials? And, with the cost of materials today, you could really be hitting against a $200,000 threshold pretty fast. And so there were a number of questions. Also, the documentation required to make sure that that this requirement is being met is quite extensive. And so I had said that for us to really understand this, that we really needed to have the benefit of the subject matter committee give us a recommendation or modify, what should be the threshold, what would be the administrative cost. Does ACCD or AG, if they have those grants that might be subject to this, whatever the threshold is, and your threshold is going to determine how many projects would meet this requirement, and that because we wanted to get these BAA completed today, the committee of policy committee would have a couple more days, and they could make the modifications, establish what they think is reasonable threshold, get the testimony from the administration and affected entities, which would probably be ACCD. I did have a brief conversation with Gus Seelig, because obviously housing projects are a big part of what's being funded here. There's also, there was a provision for retroactivity, which could be really complicated. And there was questions about how you would do it, or, and what would be workable, or is it workable to attempt to go back. And so we're going to move the budget adjustment out, and then if that amendment can be vetted and the testimony and the changes that are necessary to operationalize it would be done as an amendment to be offered before third reading. So it wouldn't hold up our moving the budget adjustment out, and still give time for economic development to give consideration around the amendment. But it got appropriations into an area that we don't have any expertise, and we don't have time to take testimony from, affected entities and from the administration, or to cost out, would positions need to be added, and where would they need to be added? And what is the reasonable threshold, and, what constitutes the cost, and so forth. So I just wanted to let you know that I didn't forward the amendment, because the way it's written would have had universal applicability on anything that was funded by ARPA, which could be, I don't know if we had it's working grant lands, the 2 million, is that ARPA?
I thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought it was the dairy premium payment. That's all ARPA funds.
Yeah, working lands is ARPA. So
Yes, yeah.
if, Senator Starr was talking about there would be projects for maybe more slaughterhouses, which is a need. Well, if you were having these small projects subject to prevailing, and it's, the wages are up now, but to calculate, is your benefit package, does it meet the 42%? And the documentation that you have to provide would really be for very relatively small amounts of money for projects, just exorbitant time and expense. They are used routinely in the capital bill, and of course AOT, Davis-Bacon requirements are very commonplace, but you're dealing with very large contracts. We're dealing with bridge projects, large construction. And so I just wanted to appraise the committee that an amendment, it has been offered, but right now is subject to modification to establish a threshold, and that we would give economic development the opportunity to get the testimony and make a recommendation to us. But we only have this afternoon to finish up the BAA, and we don't have the expertise. We would have to duplicate the work of a policy committee to do it. And this allows more time to have that occur before third reading. Senator Nitka.
Are you free to say who it came from or what group?
It came from one of our colleagues. It was Yes,
Why
it
s-
was offered by Senator Pearson.
Why so,
Pardon me?
why so late?
I don't have the answer to that. It came Friday afternoon. And Senator Sorokin, is supportive of this. But it just needs a bit more time, and it needs testimony, and it needs, the minute I looked at it, I said, do you want universal applicability for, a $20,000 grant? It would mean most of those apartment repairs are done by local contractors that might have a work crew of 2 or 3, and, for them to be able to do that work, even if you can find a contractor in this environment, to overlay those requirements that large companies are very familiar with, would be really, would require just about, you'd have to have almost a project manager. And that was not the intent, but that's how it got written. So what that threshold should be, and what it will take to administer it and what would be the impact is something that I have asked the Economic Development Committee to do. That's their area of policy. And if that's a priority, then they need to help us, because otherwise it gets us into an area that that we just normally don't engage. And so, for example, like the payment to Barry, or the language on the the extension for healthcare groups to the premium assistance, those were all vetted, and a lot of attention was given by the Committee of Jurisdiction. And so I feel that this needs to have that same level of attention, and ask Senator Sorokin to please make that a priority for his committee, knowing the time frame that we're operating under.
Yeah, and I don't see why it has to go in, would want to go in this bill. It should go in a general appropriations bill and not a budget adjustment bill. Now
Well,
you think about it, talk
Somebody
about it.
thought it was a good idea, Bobby. It's an
Well,
election. I believe it's an election year.
maybe. Is it?
I had suggested 2 options, one of which more time and do it in the 23 budget, or if in fact it's determined to be a priority and needs immediate attention, then the Committee of Jurisdiction needed to make it a priority and to get the testimony and to do the necessary modifications to the amendment that have already been identified, and we would deal with it as an amendment before 3rd reading.
But when you really think it through, it really shouldn't be in the budget adjustment. It should be in the 23 budget or on a bill on its own.
Well, we're too late for introducing bills, so the timing issue is not totally up to me to determine. I offered 2 alternatives, and we're with the I talked to the pro tem, and this is what we thought would be would give the time. And yes, Senator Baruth.
Yeah, I was just gonna support the 2 possibility idea, and I think the rationale for it going into BAA is we are apportioning big chunks of ARPA money, and I think the intent is to get ahead of that, or to go simultaneously with that, a regulation on prevailing wage. So if the Committee of Jurisdiction thinks that that's crucial, I would support putting it in the BAA on a amendment on the floor.
And the threshold will be the determining factor in terms of the complexity and the impact. I did housing, since housing is such a big part of this, did talk with Gus Seelig, the director of BHCB, and he said that really isn't, to a large extent, wouldn't be an issue. It might, it would be for smaller projects, like farm worker housing might be an example, or certainly the rental investment, to improve units that are empty now so they can be improved for and available for rent. Or it's certainly for other small grants, like, sometimes grants are going out for community, and which are managed by volunteers essentially. And these are requirements that really require that are assume a level of expertise that maybe I don't know, a historical society might get a grant, to do something for a community project or whatever. So, but that would be dealt with by setting a reasonable threshold and aligning those administrative requirements with something of substantial funding, which is going to be the topic of discussion, what that threshold should be. So I just wanted to alert the committee to that amendment and how we are going to move it forward within the time frame of the BAA. The other area that we got some testimony very specifically, and that the House kept in the budget the $15 million to go to OneCare as part of the ACO, and we had testimony from the DEVA commissioner, and I've sent it out, which I think is very important because what is happening with the OneCare provider universe is exactly what happened with our DAs, and that is these payments, these capitated payments, provide predictability of revenue that you would not have under a standard fee for service. So I wanted to say we are proposing right now that money is in there because that's part of the agreement. But I think what is really important, and I want to put this on the record, is none of the amount that is being paid will be retained by OneCare. The full amount is distributed to participating hospitals per OneCare's contractual agreement with entities. So it is a way of providing that financial stabilization to those providers. And actually that was considered in the calculation in the earlier provider stabilization money that we put in last year. So I do think that it's important to say that our provider universe benefited very directly under that OneCare contract because they got that money, even though the universe of services was influenced obviously by COVID. So that's all I would just wanted to say. And I believe that Chrissy sent that communication out to everybody because it just put in writing what we got in testimony. It did not go to enrich OneCare. It went out to fund the provider agreements and to give financial stability to the providers in this very difficult situation. And fee for service would have been you can imagine when you're not providing a lot of the healthcare services because the offices were not taking patients, et cetera, would have had a very detrimental impact on the revenue stream to our providers. So I just wanted to reference that as well as additional information that came in. And I think, is there anything else that we need to get back to, Stephanie?
That is all I have. We're working on the smaller changes. I think we need to, I don't know what the committee's desire is to reconvene and to vote as it's amended now, trusting the chair to vet the changes. The housing one is the most outstanding.
I'd make a motion. We voted out positively with, and I trust Jane to make the changes.
Make sure that we're doing everything that we said we would do on the walkthrough and to finalize the house piece.
I pretty much trust her to do that. If she doesn't, we can come back into committee and amend it afterwards, but I think she'll get it right.
Well, I
Did
don't
you
think we
say-
have too many corrections. We just need to make sure that everybody's comfortable with the ERAP program and that transition. We want to make sure that we have got the group homes, the PNMI entities, and the adult days in the list of providers for the retention and recruitment assistance. And
So basically know all of it. I'd move that we move the bill as amended.
okay, all right, so we have a motion to move the bill as amended,
I'll
knowing that we
second.
have just a few edits to make, and it's seconded by Senator Starr, and our clerk is
Get your
at
pen
the
out.
ready.
I am
want to
ready.
make a
My
comment.
question is,
Oh, I'm
Is that-
sorry. Senator Sears wants to make a comment.
go ahead.
I'm fully comfortable with all of this, and I'm glad that we're holding off to hear from economic development about the Davis-Bacon prevailing wage. I am, however, disappointed that we are keeping the 1.5 million in for the State House renovation, and I want to just be on record with that. I'll still vote for the motion, vote for the bill. There's a lot in it. It's very good. I think it's very difficult for me to see the need for this type of renovation at this point. Right now, if it was just about airflow and improving the air in the State House, I'd be fine with it. But to think about adding committee rooms for House members at a time when they've never really looked at what some of the alternatives might be. So I would think that they would do just as well with 100 members or 75 members, which would which would reduce the number of committee rooms or size of the committee rooms. Obviously, they don't want to look at that for a variety of reasons, but they have pretty much taken over, as I understand it, most of the public rooms in the State House in order for their committees to meet in larger rooms, which obviously now is demanding that the Senate gets stuck in the smaller committee rooms. I'm just really concerned about the direction they're headed. And so I just wanted to be on record with that opposition to this 1.5 million.
Okay. Yes, Senator Baruth.
My question was more procedural. So we don't have Senator Ballant with us right now. Do you want to hold the vote open?
I do.
Okay. Well-
Maybe someone could, Chrissy, could you text her or text Carolyn so that she can come in?
We'll do
For
that
the
right
vote?
now. You bet.
So
So Senator Sears, certainly, we're not using general fund, we're using the federal dollars, but you're basically saying that we could, that a lot of the need is driven by a decision that we could make that would reduce the space needs of the legislature by reducing the membership of the other body.
Well, that's one option, but the other option would be to make sure that to reconfigure some of the public spaces that we currently have and consider buildings that are not being used. For example, the building next, I always get it wrong, the one where we go for meetings downstairs.
Oh,
There's a
133
number of
State.
room- 133 State could easily become a cafeteria or something of that nature. So we're not even considering some of the other options within the Capitol complex.
Okay.
Well, are they gonna redo the basement for us?
You mean the Marble Palace?
Yeah, I mean, way down deep, they'll keep moving us down if they're.
No,
moving up.
we've got that. That's where Senate Ag's gonna be.
Yeah. It's got windows down there, Bobby.
Hey,
I had suggested that maybe Senate Ag could move up with the mezzanine space that got freed up. but that, I guess, didn't, because there was some nice space up there, obviously, and Ledge Council, the attorneys got all consolidated into into that beautiful building where BGS was. So I thought that would help deal with that. But the big problem is all our meeting room space is, we have none now.
Oh,
I mean, because we don't have the legislative lounge, we don't have, I guess the mezzanine got made into sitting areas for the public to observe. I don't know exactly what the plan is.
have they moved into the Senate yet, the House members? You know,
I think they will be shortly.
Only the only I know is just Representative Hooper has provided her testimony from our committee room as though she were there. We were there in person. So that's the only use of committee room that I know of, and it seemed totally appropriate.
Luckily,
So,
luckily
do we
John
have-
Bloomer texted the Senate chamber.
Well, I would put in a word for Senator Benning too. He's not going to allow the House to take over from the Senate in any real way. So I support it. I think we're continually at our wits' end for space. Senator Mazza has made a point about the cost itself. Maybe 1.5 is too much, but I do support the effort of figuring out the next step in how to get a little more space for all of us, especially now that we've got, contagious disease considerations thrown into the mix.
But when I was
well-
doing the dairy compact, of course, we had to go around to other states to get them, to agree to join up. I'll tell you, some of those states have got some pretty, New England, got
Yeah.
some pretty fancy office space, hearing space, underground moving sidewalks, above ground moving sidewalks that are all enclosed from one building to another.
Yeah, and high, high salaries. Like the last I checked in New York, they were between $150,000 and $200,000 for some.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a part-time job.
Well, not
No,
only
no,
that, they
full-time.
also have
No.
offices in their home district and staff. So they have both staff in their home district. Someone I've known for years has chaired the health committee in the New York Assembly and lives in Manhattan. And so they have offices in Albany, and they have them in their home district as well, and staff to help them. It's a whole different world. We're a citizens legislature, but what's becoming harder is just the volume of work as it relates to particularly the volume of emails and requests that are coming in. The reports are coming in. It's very hard to keep up on all the reports. And I want you to know, I did find the VSAC report and the last paragraph, and I am going to ask the Scott Giles when he comes in if he has a recommendation around it. But what it would, they have people who are interested in it, but they already have a degree and they would like to take courses in another subject area that's very much related to an occupational pursuit. And so that was the issue around if you already had a degree, would you be able to get assistance to pursue another occupational area? And so I just wanted you to know that I was successful, that I was not hallucinating, that I had read that. And unfortunately, when a recommendation is the absolute last paragraph in a report, it presumes that someone is going to read the whole report. And in this case, it wasn't that long, but it's the thousands of pages of material that end up, coming our way. So it's not just what,
Madam, send me a single line email to remind me, because I'm not as, I haven't got the memory you do, and I'll make sure, because the person that will answer that question is Marilyn Cargill.
well, she's the one who wrote the report.
I know that.
But I assumed that Scott would be coming in for their budget, so I thought should
Well,
be prepared.
He might bring Marilyn with him.
I'm sure I would too if I were he.
Well, I think they ought to work harder on getting high school graduates into getting some of this money and not worry so much about others expanding their educational opportunities. I mean,
Well,
it's simple.
this was money just specifically to help with guard recruitment. So that it's dedicated money, and it's not, the take up hasn't been as great as the funding would allow. And so that was the question, would we allow the use of that money for
And
this purpose?
It's all in the critical occupations, right? You can't get a second degree in art history, right?
I think, unless you would just want to be self-actualized.
Of course, with all the money that Senator Starr got in the bill for his pet projects, I'm sure that, he wouldn't mind this little one.
Mm-hmm.
Careful now.
So
It's adding up, Bobby.
Couple of $1 million. I mean,
Yeah, million here, million there. Pretty soon you're talking real money, Bobby.
last year, that little bit of money multiplied 10 to 1.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, should I call the roll?
Yes,
well,
please.
I don't know. I was waiting for if Senator Ballant, but what I can do is hold it open until we get her vote, and we can do call the roll now and just hold it.
I was just looking for a way to get between Senator Sears and Senator Starr.
Okay.
I will call the roll. Okay. Senator Ballant, Senator Baruth, yes. Senator Nitka,
Yes.
Senator Sears,
Yes.
Senator Starr,
Yes.
Senator Westman,
Yes.
Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
So 6-0 and vote held open.
Okay. So we don't have anything scheduled for more. I've wanted to make sure that we didn't overbook today. And the priority was to get the budget adjustment finished up. So with that, I will get Senator Ballant's vote. And yes, yes, Chrissy.
I just want to let you know, Senator Ballant just joined us right now. So if you'd like to do it
Great,
while we're still-
wonderful.
Great. Thank you,
Senator Ballant, we're waiting for your vote.
That's what I
think
heard. Catherine Benham tracked me down, and
Okay.
we are voting on the budget adjustment, right? We just want to make sure that I know what we're voting on.
Yeah, and I did explain about the amendment on prevailing wage and how we were going to give more time and bring that up after the committee had done its work.
Wonderful.
So yes, so we're voting out the budget adjustment now.
Great. And so I vote in the affirmative.
Okay, so we have 7-0-0. Thank you. And I'm the reporter of the budget adjustment unless somebody else wants to do it. I don't see any hands.
We wouldn't want to get in your way.
Or mess it up.
Okay.
I did have a question, Jane, about,
Yeah.
I was talking with Secretary Bloomer earlier today about presenting
Our
budget.
usual presentation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just wanted to get a sense from you of a day and time that you think is best for that.
Well, we would do second reading. Let's see, it would be on notice tomorrow, which is Wednesday. So we would, I would think the best thing to do is Thursday. before we take it up. So Thursday, we're there at 1, is that right?
Yep. So just do it at 1 when we all, or do you want to
Well,
get?
they may want a caucus too in between, the hours.
I don't know, maybe, so maybe we should, let's see.
12:30?
Yeah, we could do something at 12:30, or we could even do it at noon. I mean, since we're meeting remotely, we could do the caucus at noon.
Okay.
And that should give us time to run through it.
Okay, great. I'll let John know. Great.
Senator Sears, are you commenting? Because you're muted.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mute myself. 12:15 would be much preferable to give us time to go
Sure.
from one committee to
Okay.
another committee.
Yeah. Okay, 12:15 then Thursday, and then that'll be time. And obviously we will have this online and a notice, so people have a chance to look at it. Any other comments before we adjourn the committee for today? Okay, so I don't know what time is it? What time is it?
3:15.
3:15.
Oh, 3:15. Yeah, I've got 3 devices here. Let me tell you, I've got the text, I've got emails, and I've got my Zoom. And
You need another eye.
I left my phone at home. So I'm going to